Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis here on the podcast. If you want the full big game breakdown statistically, fancy stats Landis bringing all his fancy stats. We did that on Kings of the North on Wednesday, Bill. We had a nice, healthy discussion about all the ins and outs of the matchups and that kind of thing. So we certainly would direct this audience to that as well, correct?
Yeah, we'll probably hit on a lot of the same stuff here, but there's some number stuff in that conversation that might not pop up here. So if you just make sure you don't want to miss anything that we've said about this game, check that out too.
So we didn't fight. We didn't fight exactly on that show, but we came at it from two different. We both were on edge. We could hear the edge in our voices, right, about this game. And I think it's because we believe it is that important of a game for the Ohio State football program. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It is maybe the most important non-Michigan game I think that I've covered in my time.
Okay. So this is what, now you're talking my language. That's exactly where I want to take this discussion to start this show.
Okay.
I went through the last 10 years and the last 20 years. So this is your 10th, your 11th year being around Ohio State, right?
This is
14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23,
11th year. Yes.
It's my 20th year. So the thing I was the way I was categorizing this is that if you win the game, you're one kind of team and program. And if you lose the game, you're a different kind of team and program. Mm-hmm. And games like that in Ohio State history. Consequential, I think, is the word. And that's what you're talking about here. That this perhaps, I would maybe argue, I think you could argue that it's the most consequential game since the Bama semifinal, because that's a line in the sand for what the Ohio State program then became and what it would have been if it had lost that game, I think. So I think this is absolutely in the range of that. But I think you could maybe say this is the most consequential since then. And then we could debate the two of those maybe. But yeah.
Sure. Yeah. That would probably be the only other one that I would throw into the conversation. The stakes are different, right? The Alabama game in 2014, the Sugar Bowl, was just a tremendous opportunity to push the program forward into something that I wouldn't even say like it hadn't been, because I don't know how many times it really had the opportunity. But I guess to that point, like those opportunities do not come around a lot for Ohio State, right? So you had to take advantage of it in that moment, and Ohio State definitely did. This is partly that, I think, but it's also, it could have a pretty drastic impact on like the head coaching situation too, right? Even if you don't think it's a must win, Ryan Day is coaching for his job in this game kind of scenario. At the very least, if he loses, he's on the hot seat, right? Like yes. It is a very legitimate hot seat conversation, which then of course alters the trajectory of the program moving forward. It's still in a significant way. So I would say because of that, this feels more consequential, but definitely the Sugar Bowl had its consequences.
Because rarely in sport, not just college football, are you in a position where if you win a game, you have a chance to win the title, a very legitimate chance to win the title. And if you lose the game, your coach might be fired.
It's rare. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it has happened. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Yeah. So I think the stakes on both ends, and I don't know. I mean, I think you could look, right? I think a lot of people say the super soft season in 68 pulled Woody back from the brink, that things had not been going great. But I don't know. That was maybe a season that a coach and a program needed. I'm not sure there was an individual game, because once you get to the Michigan game there or get to the postseason, I don't know that you would say, well, if you would have lost that one game, that would have been, it was like, well, he needed a good year, and they had a good year.
Yeah.
This is really down to a game. I think maybe, I do think you could argue that the 2020 Clemson semifinal win was incredibly consequential, because it felt like everything about that season was geared toward avenging what happened in the 2019 semifinal. And then especially once they got the rematch, if Ohio State had not won that game, I think people would have viewed the program differently. And if we think now that Ryan Day has a reputation for not being able to win big games, if they hadn't beaten Clemson that day, it would be fivefold, I think. So I think that was that was a bit of a line in the sand turning point game.
Yeah, I think the nature of that season probably took a little less off of it, right? Like it's like, how many coaches in the 2020 season would have lost their jobs had they performed the exact same way in what was a normal season, right? I think a few of them, including Jim Harbaugh. But it didn't happen because of just how odd that season was. So like that game, yes, like that game was a moment for Ohio State. There was a lot of build up to it. I don't know if I felt like it had tremendous consequences in the moment. I guess you can look back at it now and say that it did, because it is, when you talk about like, Ryan Day's ability to go win a game like Ohio State has to go win on Saturday. The game you'd point to first probably is that 2020 Clemson win as an example of, yes, he can do it.
Yeah. I think that was a big deal. I think we knew it in the moment. I think we knew it. Like,
it was a big deal. Yeah. Not like, I don't know. It wasn't like an or else, right? It wasn't, but yes,
well, that's
they had
the thing. This is the thing. And this is why I didn't like natty or bust, because it's not the natty part I disagree with. It's the bust part. Because that bust to me is like, as a program, like natty or bust means if we don't win it now, when are we ever going to win it? And then I would say, well, I don't know, maybe next year with Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs and Julian Sayin and Edric Houston and James Peoples and Carnell Tate and Jelani Thurman and Sonny Styles and Jermaine Matthews and a million guys that you could list. Then it sounds like, well, I don't know. They seem like they have a chance to win it. So I didn't like the bust part of that conversation. Do they sort of need to win the natty because there are a lot of things in place and there's expectations in NIL and guys put off the NFL and they got transfers? Yeah. But, or bust, because even if they make a coaching change, the program's not bust, right? That would be, so I didn't like the bust. So the bust I never applied to Ohio State because they're not in a bust state. I think Michigan last year was much more or bust, because is Michigan really going to maintain the talent level and the coaching level? If you knew Harbaugh was probably head to the NFL at some point, I think that was different. So I don't like the bust. The or else I think is interesting, because now I'm repeating myself, but when's the last or else in Ohio State history? And I don't think we know enough to know the answer. I don't think Urban ever got to an on the field or else. I don't think Fickle was in an or else situation, because that was, if he didn't win the national championship that year, they were going to go get Urban, and they made it pretty clear early on they weren't going to win the national championship. I don't think Tressel ever got to an or else situation. Earl, I mean, now I'm skipping Coop. Coop is just such a hard thing to wrap your head around, because there's the Michigan thing and then the lost opportunities of potential national championship runs. But I think part of the or else, you have to realize going into the game, like an or else I don't think is an upset. This is a big game against a good opponent and you need to win. And so I don't know. I mean, if Coop, there might be people watching this and listening to this saying, oh, if Coop would have won this game. And we've run through a couple of those, but it's like a bunch of them. Coop's worst losses to Michigan were when Ohio State was highly ranked and Michigan was not ranked, which is the point we made for this Michigan game, right? That's really the worst of Coop, is losing to unranked teams. So, I mean, Coop's last year, they were number 12. Michigan was number 19. In the shoe, Michigan beat them, and then they lost to South Carolina, and that was it for him. So maybe that Michigan game was the moment. Like the last or else game. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good one. So, I mean, I just think that's the part of this that is so different. Let me run through what I believe since 2014 are the 10 most consequential Ohio State games and see what you think. And these are all games that you were around for, so you can comment on this. To me, you had to know they were consequential going in. So, for instance, I don't have this year's Michigan game on this list, because going in, I probably should, because we kind of knew they got to beat Michigan. Like, I don't know, but also everyone thought they were going to beat Michigan. So
I think, but the only reason we're having this conversation is because of that game.
Right, but were we thinking going into that game, oh man, he better win this game? It was like, oh no, they're going to win.
I mean, that was the conversation coming into the season. It's like he has to beat Michigan this year.
All right, so it's 11. All right, I'll add it.
Yeah.
I think 23 Michigan and 22 Michigan both apply.
Yeah.
So because 23
I think
is
almost every Michigan game applies.
But I would argue, because I would not put 21 on this list, because here's the thing. Okay, 24 is, okay, it's been a 3-game losing streak. Michigan's not even good. You've got to beat them. That's the 2024 game. 2023 is, okay, this Connor Stallion stuff has come out. I guess they're not cheating anymore if they were. Jim Harbaugh's suspended. You're coaching against the fill-in guy. You've got to win this game. There were multiple circumstances. 22 is, you're at home. You have CJ Stroud, and of course, Ohio State wasn't going to beat Michigan in perpetuity. So 22 is the opportunity to make the 21 loss a blip, not a trend. So I think but 21 is like, all right, what are you going to do? I think it's different. It didn't feel like to me after 21 that it was like, oh my God, the program's on fire. It's like, okay, all dominant streaks have to come to an end. Ohio State will get them next year at home.
I think I agree with that. Yeah.
All right. So that's 3 Michigan games. I would put then, so in this recent era, Oregon in 21. It's CJ Stroud's second start. Let's see what this team is. How good might they be? Here comes a pretty good opponent into the shoe. Oregon was 12th coming into that game, and Ohio State lost. I thought that was a little bit of a prove it moment. And they didn't prove it. And then at least I was there. We had like a month of, I don't know, is CJ Stroud the right guy? What's up with this team? Okay, he's going to take a week off like that. That if they had just beaten Oregon, we wouldn't have had any of that. So I thought that was consequential.
Yeah, I think so.
2020 Clemson in the semifinal. After building up to that, we talked about that. 2017 Penn State, I think, is maybe a little bit of an underrated one, because this is Penn State had beaten Ohio State in 2016. And Penn State was higher ranked going into that game in 2017. Penn State was 2 and Ohio State was 6. And it was a chance for the worm to turn. Like, oh, is Penn State on Ohio State's level now? Is Penn State asserting itself? And instead, JT Barrett let a fourth quarter come back and they won that game 39-38. But that was a chance for Penn State to be the new big dog in the Big Ten East, and Ohio State held them off.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Oklahoma, early in the season in 16, everybody thought this is a young team who knows how good they're going to be. Ohio State was higher ranked, but I think you and Ari and I, was it Ari or was it Bielik?
Yeah, it was Ari. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I think the three of us thought this might be a lot to ask of a young Ohio State team. And they went out and won that game. And I can remember all those young guys, Sam Hubbard and some guys after that game being like, people think we're young and we're not ready for this, but we are. I thought that was a consequential game.
Yeah, that was to your point, a young team. The roster had turned over after all those guys went to the NFL. We didn't know exactly what they were going to be. And if like that was any kind of step back year, it almost would have been understandable, but we weren't sure at that point if it would have been or not. And then that was like an emphatic, like, no, it's not. I was like, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And then 16 Michigan, 2-3 game. Very much thinking going into that, if Michigan doesn't beat them now, when are they ever going to beat them? And then JT Barrett runs into AJ Alexander's butt and they get the spot and all those things, right? But that felt very consequential that they held off Michigan for the moment then. 2015 Michigan State, they have a chance to be a modern mini dynasty. Michigan State was in the top 10 going into that game. That wasn't an out of nowhere upset, but they blew a chance to go down in history by losing that game.
It was just out of nowhere because Michigan State had to do it with its backup quarterback.
Right.
But otherwise, yeah, it was. I don't remember what the spread was, like if that was a close spread or not. But it was a top 10 team and a team that had given Ohio State problems. Yeah.
Yeah. 2014 Michigan State. This is the revenge game from losing the Big Ten championship in 2013. A lot of build up for that. Michigan State was 7. That was on the road. JT Barrett probably played his best game, and that asserted, I think, after the Virginia Tech loss earlier in the year, that showed us that this Ohio State team in 2014 was for real.
Yes, that was. It was. We always look back on that season in an odd way. It wasn't like the ascent to here we go. Ohio State's going to kill everybody now, but it was like, okay, this team has a ceiling to it where it can go win the whole thing.
And then 2014 Bama semifinal.
Yeah.
So if we agree on those 11 games in the last 11 years, they're 6-5 in those games, which isn't too bad. right? Mm-hmm. But it's I would again that's what this is. We're in the midst of history here.
Can you so imagine? They're 6-5 in those games, but the 4 of the losses are a day.
So it's 3 Michigan losses and the Oregon loss. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So day is 1-2. Day is 1-4.
Yeah. Okay.
In line in the sand, program defining. And again, this is one of those where I get snippety sometimes when people don't count wins over Penn State and wins over Notre Dame in big games. But if they would have lost to Notre Dame or lost to Penn State a time or two under Ryan Day, I don't know that anybody would have said, okay, that's it. This program is not who we thought it was. You know, it would have been like, okay, they've got to get them next time, but I guess Notre Dame's pretty good. So that's why I didn't count it here. And then I didn't count some of the upsets like, you know, losing to Purdue and Iowa under Urban. It's like, okay, well, those came out of nowhere. Nobody knew they were consequential going into the game. You didn't think to yourself. To me, consequential has to be you think it going in, and then it turns out to be coming out. Both are required. So I just don't think those are nice wins over Notre Dame. But if they had lost, I don't think it would have been the end of the world. The way if they lose to Tennessee, it's going to be the end of the world.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, like, I know we had a couple early season games in there. I do think it is pretty difficult for games played in September or August to be all that consequential, which those Notre Dame games were, at least. So I don't know. I think it's fine to not have those on there. And if people think we're giving Ryan Day kind of short shrift because of that, that's okay.
But I do think the whole point of this is to re-emphasize that this new playoff structure has created, I think, a new kind of game for us. Because to your point, it's hard to make early season non-conference games do or die. Because they're early, maybe your team hasn't rounded into form yet, and you have a lot of time to recover from it. I think it is hard to make conference games do or die because you can always get them next year. Now, a rivalry game is different than a conference game, so I'm not counting Michigan in there, but I don't know that any regular season Oregon game or Penn State game or Wisconsin game could be as consequential for Ohio State. Do you agree with that thinking?
Yeah, I think so, especially now that it wouldn't be prohibitive. More often than that, probably wouldn't be prohibitive relative to the playoff, or even the Big Ten championship.
Bowls, I used to really value bowl season for trying to define conferences and define strength and really tell you something about your program. But once we got to opt-outs, that disappeared. Like the Missouri loss in the bowl game means nothing to me.
Right.
I don't know that it means, it was embarrassing in the moment. I think it was embarrassing for 48 hours for Ohio State fans, but I don't think it was definitive in any way because it's like, well, it's Lincoln Keenholz. What are you going to do?
Yeah, no, I don't really factor that game into much of my thought processes about this team or Ryan Day.
And then, for instance, going back to the Florida National Championship game, the LSU National Championship game in 2006 and 2007, of course. But you were playing the 1 or 2 best team in the country. So I just have a harder time drawing a line and being like, that is unacceptable when you're playing the second best team in the country or the best team in the country. So 2006 was not great, right? In 2007 and we understand all of that. But I think that's different than this because this Tennessee team is not 2006 Florida, and this Tennessee team is not 2007 LSU unless Glenn Dorsey and Ricky Jean-Francois are showing up. And this is a new kind of game. It is definitive. It is contextualized. There's no excuses. It's a good team. It really matters, but it is not a great team. It is, I don't think this Tennessee team is well, what are you going to do? Sometimes you lose to a good team. That is not how I view this for Ohio State. So from that standpoint, and again, maybe this isn't a surprise. It's like, Doug, it's a 12-team playoff. I've never had this before. I think this is a game unlike any in Ohio State history.
Sure. Yeah. It definitely is. Yeah. For all the reasons you laid out and for the obvious ones. but then also like just the path of Ohio State to get here just adds that much more to it, right? So, I mean, Ryan Day has called this historic. I don't think he had the idea of like, well, what happens if you lose in mind, but
right.
I think for a lot of other reasons, it definitely is.
That wasn't asked. Ron, would you say, hey, it's, if you win, you can win the national title. If you lose, you might be out of your office. Is it historic for that reason? It's like, no, it's not that specifically, except it is that specifically. For us, it's that specifically.
Sure.
And I didn't like Natty or Bust at the beginning of the year because I said, how come nobody's having a conversation about 15-0 in history? Why you only have the negative conversation when you have that? Because when you put the bust on it, you make it a negative conversation. You aren't just saying, oh, do you think Ohio State can win the national championship? Okay, let's have that conversation. Well, I think they could. I think they're good here. I think these other teams do this. I think they have this kind of schedule. You're automatically saying it's natty or else. You're adding the or else. And our whole point here is that when you have an or else, it changes everything. So I didn't like it in the preseason. I yelled at people in the preseason when they tried to ask me about it. I'm okay with it here.
Okay. I was going to say, it'd be a heck of a thing to go through all that. Then you say, like, I still don't agree with it.
Oh, well, they tried. Good try. Good try, Ohio State is the headline of my column. Yeah. After their 42-17 loss, when Nico Iamaleava throws for 6 touchdown passes, Davis Enigmignosin has 9 penalties. Good try, Ohio State. Get them next year. Rye. That is not the headline of my fake column.
No, I kind of feel the same way. I never like, yes, they were gearing up clearly to win a national title. And if they didn't win it, it would be a tremendous disappointment based off of everything that went into it. But in my mind, it was never like Ryan Day in July has to go win a national title to keep his job. But my mind changed 3 weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. I think, does anybody disagree with us here? Does anybody disagree? People watching, people listening, people on the beat, that this is an or else conversation, this is an incredibly consequential game for the history of Ohio State football?
I think there's some disagreement. Yeah. I don't know if there's a lot. And I think maybe part of the disagreement would not be, because you're opposed to the notion, but because you just don't think Ohio State would do it. Maybe that's more of it. But there's definitely mixed feelings about it. Like I see it even, I feel like from our tech subscribers, I see it on Twitter too. It's like there are a lot of people I think in the boat of Ryan Day needs to go win this thing to keep his job, but I don't think everyone's there. I think I wouldn't call it a 50-50 split, but it is definitely mixed.
Okay. Would it not be it would be an incredibly disappointing 10-3 season if they lose this thing?
Yeah.
Okay. We have to be able to have conversations about disappointing, below expectations, and not have it automatically lead to firing. That is also one of the things that I dislike about sports conversations that I am currently doing, which is like, not good enough, you're out. We have to be able to say, not good enough, get better. We have to be able to say that. So, and we're going to get into the game more here in a little bit. But you and I made it very clear, I think, on the Sunday sound off after the Michigan game, that we were not at win or else. Oh, actually win, or just get better. Like that changed things for us. Like, why do you think it changed it so? Why did it change it so definitively for you?
Just because that loss was so shocking. Like I think that I was willing to give. I don't know if benefit of the doubt is the right word for it, but I think not that losing to Michigan should ever be like acceptable, but I thought it was at least sort of explainable, like that it happened the first 3 years. And whether you want to attribute that to Connor Stallions or the fact that Michigan just had a good football team, I think you could even do both if you wanted to. But I found a decent amount of truth in that. And sometimes you play good teams and you lose, right? But This was not that. Everyone knows that. I don't need to belabor that point. So once that happened, though, then you sort of just like start to question everything before. It's like, okay, was it just losing to a good team, or was there something more to it? Is this guy ever going to get it right? By the way, we're on 4 years in a row of them not beating Michigan, not winning the Big Ten, and perhaps not winning a national title. When, I'm not saying winning a national title is easy, but don't tell me what your goals are and then get mad when you get held to them. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that's kind of where I ended up with it. It blew my mind so much that Michigan game that I very quickly got there. I wasn't anticipating getting there necessarily with Ryan Day this year because it never really crossed my mind that Ohio State was going to lose to Michigan this season because just of how Michigan's year had gone. But then once it happened, it kind of just slaps you in the face and, I don't know, straightens out your thought process pretty quickly.
Okay. So let's talk about where our texters are with this game, and then we'll talk about where we are with this specific matchup. I asked the text subscribers, Ohio State's favored by 7 points over Tennessee. What do you think will happen in Saturday's game? Ohio State will win by 8 or more. Ohio State will win by 7 points or fewer, or Tennessee will win. What do you think won, Landis, in the vote?
Ohio State win, Tennessee cover. Those are the middle one.
Ohio State will win by 8 or more, 40%. Ohio State will win by 7 points or fewer, 39%. Tennessee will win 21%.
Okay.
From our educated, dedicated, loyal Ohio State Tech subscribers. I've been asking all year about faith in the national championship. How confident are you in Ohio State's national title chances on a scale of 1 to 10, Bill? What do you believe? That number was above 8 going into the Oregon game, and it climbed back towards near 8 before the Michigan game. What do you believe it is now?
6.
It is 5.25. 5.25. Okay. So that's about where it's been, but it's like the lowest. I think that's the lowest it's been the entire year, which also is not entirely surprising.
No.
Asked for national title picks. I also did this right after the bracket came out. Oregon is still the national title pick. That did not really change much. Ohio State is still the number 2 pick for our tech subscribers. Oregon had been at 50% the day after the bracket came out. Now they're at 51%. Ohio State had been at 29% the day after the bracket came out. Now they're at 32%. I think we're in the margin of error here. And maybe it's the Georgia injury. Georgia went from 12% to 9%, so maybe people don't like Gunnar Stockton.
Fair. Why would you?
Why would you?
Although I guess I have a question why you like Carson Beck too.
Well, actually, I mean, like I've certainly thought about that. And I think I've talked about that. The idea that I think I said this on one of the shows when you weren't on, that I don't think Gunnar Stockton is going to be a Cardale Jones situation where he comes in and plays awesome. But I think it's possible that Carson Beck was so bad, especially turning the ball over, that they just dial it back offensively and don't let Gunnar Stockton make any mistakes. And that actually makes the Georgia offense a little bit better because they just totally lean on their defense, don't let their quarterback do anything, and then Carson Beck stops killing them, and Gunnar Stockton is just like 11 for 15 for 96 yards, and Georgia's trying to win 17-14. And that might actually be a better formula for them.
They're going to Iowa this thing, huh?
They're going to Iowa this thing, which is like, it is like their turnover prone quarterback got hurt, and it was the key to unlocking Georgia's national title run. Gives me nightmares.
You're making me sick.
I know. So I don't even want to think about it. How far will Ohio State go in the playoff? Lose to Oregon in the quarters is still the number one answer. 39%. Win the Natty, 31%. Lose in the first round to Tennessee, 21%. Lose in the semi, 6%. Lose in the national title game, 3%. When I asked this right after the bracket came out, losing to Tennessee in the first round was only at 15%. Now it's at 21%. Do you think Ohio State fans they're learning more about Tennessee, probably through you mostly, and now they're thinking that this Tennessee defense could be a real problem for Ohio State, and they've absorbed that, and they're wondering if the Buckeyes can win? Way to go, Landis. Fancy stats.
I think they've absorbed Ryan Day talking about rotating his guards in a playoff game.
Oh, my God. Okay. So that was news that came out Wednesday. As we record this, we're recording this a half day early before we drop it to you on Thursday morning. let's have this. So this is like the number one thing. A lot of these big games, we do the big game breakdown on KOTN. We've done various things here on Kings of Columbus. We've done a lot of drafts of the most important people in this game, but we just want to riff a little bit. We just want to sort of talk this out with you guys. Could the guard situation be the death of Ohio State, or can they scheme around it?
I mean, yes to both.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could be. I don't know, as we're talking now, and we haven't made official picks yet. I think that it definitely could be. I don't know that I 100% think that it would be. Although if I'm being honest, I think I'm leaning a little bit in that direction, just because it just seems so problematic, right? I don't. The fact that that's where Ohio State is going into this game just like kind of blows my mind a little bit. And it's not even like I would feel better about it, and maybe still not great, but better if it was they're benching Tegra Shabola, they're going to put Austin Sareveld at right guard, they're going to put Luke Montgomery at left guard. That's your starting five. Go play and see what happens. But that doesn't sound like their plan. And I guess there are a couple different ways you could approach it, and a couple of them are more optimistic, or at least one of them is, and it's that they're not super happy with Tegra's play, but perhaps rightly assume that he still has the highest ceiling of any of the guys in the conversation. So if they go about it the way they're going about it, maybe that sparks something in Tegra to bring out a different level of play in him. If they truly don't know who the two of those three who are the right ones to play, like that is a problem. Because I don't think it's not like Austin Saraveld's been awesome. I think he's probably been a little better than Tegra, but not degrees better. So I just don't feel great about that situation going up against this defensive line. And I don't really know why anyone would necessarily.
Okay. Let me run two things by you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One is, what if the idea is, because last time they put in a guy on the offensive line, Zen Mahalski, he was terrible. And it was awful, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For Josh Simmons. So what if what they're really thinking is, we're going to play Luke Montgomery, but we don't want to tell Tegra or Austin that they're benched and have them get their daubers down in case Luke Montgomery goes in the game and looks completely overwhelmed. And we have to go back to the guys who played. They will not be, I was benched and now I have to play again. They'll be like, we just stuck with the guys who were playing the best in the rotation. I think it could be semantics, protecting themselves against Luke Montgomery making his first career start and just not being ready. But actually what they are planning is, things go normally, Luke Montgomery is the left guard, and whoever plays better at right guard is going to play most of the game. And let's see how it goes. I would be okay
better.
With that.
Do you mean better in practice leading up to it, or better through some rotation during the game?
I think I would. So do you think Montgomery will take the first snap at left guard?
Yes.
Who do you think will take the first snap at right guard? Tegra or Sareveld?
Tegra.
Okay. So my guess would be, during the game. So if they start with Montgomery and Shabola, figuring Luke's ready for this, we're going to assume Luke is ready, but we're going to talk it in a way that to protect ourselves. And then if Shabola has a good first series, maybe he stays in. If he has a bad first series, Sareveld comes in for the second series. If Sareveld has a good second series, he stays in for the third series, and away we go. And I mean, if I had to guess, maybe the way it's going to go, maybe my guess would be Montgomery plays the whole game at left guard. Shabola starts at right guard, looks iffy. Sareveld comes in and plays the rest of the game. And then when we say after the game, how come it wasn't a rotation? You said it was going to be a rotation. Ryan Day says, we played the guys who were playing the best. We rode the hot hand.
Yeah, very possible. If this is all just a way to make sure your messaging is correct and keep everyone engaged, then I guess I don't have a problem with it. I'm just worried that it's more than that. I'm worried that it is, we don't know who to play, so we're going to play all three of them. Because the other thing that Ryan Day didn't say he was going to rotate at right guard. He said they were going to rotate at both guard spots.
Right. So, okay. That's one thing. My one thing is maybe they actually feel better and they're just playing word games. Mm-hmm. Here's my second thing. I have a horrible memory. But there are occasionally things that stick in my head. And one of the things that sticks in my head is finding Pat Elflein's family after the game at Michigan when Marcus Hall got ejected for the double bird.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat Elflein had to go in and play for him. And he played very well. And like him kind of coming out and being welcomed by his family. And it was like, look at what this guy did. And Pat Elflein was ready, right? And then that was the beginning of Pat Elflein, all Big Ten offensive lineman. It started that way.
Remington Trophy winner.
Being called into unexpected duty, maybe a little earlier than planned. And then I think of Wyatt Davis. Demetrius Knox gets hurt. Here comes Wyatt Davis at the end of that season. He's ready. And Wyatt Davis is like the exact same spot as Montgomery. Pretty highly rated guy at guard in year 2.
Yeah.
He was ready to go. And I do think, you're the offensive line expert, the difference of being ready at the end of year 2 of your college career to play on the offensive line as opposed to being ready at the beginning of year 2. Like, well, if Luke Montgomery was so good, how come he didn't win a job in camp?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible. It is a sea change of figuring stuff out, continuing to get stronger. And I think it's possible that Luke Montgomery is super ready. And this is the beginning of his Pat Elflein, Wyatt Davis story that begins with, my first start was in the college football playoff and I locked it down and I didn't leave the offensive line for the next 3 years.
I find that comforting a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad way to look at it. Those guys were ready when they had to get called upon right away. The Wyatt Davis situation, I can't remember. So 2013, was that also, I guess it was also Pat Elflein's second year, right? He was a redshirt freshman that year.
That's right. Yeah.
So I guess both are kind of similar. I don't know how much Pat played throughout that season, but
yes, both. Yeah, they were both in their second year when they had to play.
Yeah. And Luke's deal partly is they had to figure out where he fit best, like positionally, to the point where he was playing center in camp. After playing tackle last year, and he didn't play guard in a game until this year. So feels like they got that part figured out. And if he's just progressively gotten better throughout the year, then I guess that makes sense. Because the other thing I picked up on with Ryan Day, as he was talking about this during the week, is that I don't know that they necessarily regret not going to Montgomery earlier, but that it was like at least a thought in their minds that maybe they should, and they erred on the side of experience instead. Especially like after Seth McLaughlin went out, not the first move with Carson Hinsman. But after Seth McLaughlin went out and Carson Hinsman had to go to center, it seemed like maybe Luke was making enough of a push, doing enough in practice that they were like, I think pretty strongly considering it, but instead chose to play Austin Satterfield, who had at least started a couple games and had played more than Luke Montgomery. But behind the scenes, maybe Luke was just still getting after it, and now he's ready to roll. So that could very well be it. Yeah.
I like giving optimistic scenarios to our dedicated, educated, loyal Ohio State audience.
I think it's especially important in this scenario. Yeah. It's like not to be like sunshine pumpers or whatever. It's just like to offer varying perspectives when a lot of it is like, I think a lot of people are where I am, which is like, I can't believe this is happening. There's no way this is going to work well. So
it can't be worse than when Zen Michalski started. That was the worst it can be. At left tackle at the most important spot, and a guy who just is clearly not ready for it. Right? So it's already been the worst it can be. Yes?
But people are still, yeah, probably. But people are scarred from that, and people are scarred from going into the bowl game against Missouri last year and moving Matthew Jones to center and putting Enoch Vamahi at guard, and Enoch Vamahi couldn't block anybody. And like the offensive line played terribly in that game against the good SEC defensive front.
And I also, again, I would argue, I almost like it better that Luke is young, that he's only a second-year guy. Because Enoch Vamahi, at that point, by last year, he was a fourth-year guy, right? A fourth-year guy who had never been good enough. And it's like, do you think he got good yesterday? No, he didn't. And Zen Michalski's what, a third-year guy?
Fourth-year guy.
Fourth-year guy. Oh, did Zen figure it out? He's ready now? He wasn't ready when we were like desperately searching for tackles the last 2 years, but now in year 4, coincidentally, right when Josh Simmons got hurt is right when Zen Michalski figured it out. No! They were never good enough. They were never part of the plan. They were desperation. Luke Montgomery's not desperation. Luke Montgomery's just early. But the end of year 2 is not that far from the start of year 3. Now I sound like a coach. By the end of your sophomore year, you're a junior, right? So this makes much more sense to me. Luke Montgomery was brought here to start, was he not?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think, because I can remember, no, I'm trying to think. There have been guys along the way who you kind of maybe think like, oh man, I wonder if they would have been ready a little earlier if they're such a big time recruit, whatever. And it's like, but this is, I think this could be absolutely fine. That's not great. I actually think it maybe could be great, but also, so there's two things that are possibly happening here. One is Justin Fry has no handle on his room. He cannot figure out who among the guys that he stares in the face every day, that he went into their homes and got them to come to Ohio State. He has no idea who's good and who's not. Or he does have an idea and Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are overruling him. And then it's like, why aren't you letting your position coach your guys? Because whatever the decision-making process was, that now we're at the point where it's like, oh, I think Luke Montgomery is ready. It's like, then how did you get to Zen Michalski as your first choice? What were you doing? And if Luke Montgomery was ready, how have you not figured out that maybe the Saravel Shabola rotation at right guard is the best you're going to do there and hope one of those two has a good game and Montgomery should have been playing for half the year? It feels like they don't know who their good linemen are.
Yeah, but you find that reassuring? Because I don't.
No. That's not part of the sunshine pumper. That was no sunshine pumping right there. Pump that sunshine. Hey, guys. Hey, Doug. Hey, Bill. What's going on in Buckeye land? Well, we think Justin Fry doesn't know his players. That sounds great. No, it is not. That is not a sunshine pump. It is a tangential point that we should take into the offseason of what is happening here. Because I don't mean it, but and again, to get to your 6th and 7th offensive lineman and now your 8th it's not crazy. Because if something happened to Denzel Burke or Davis and Nick Magnoson, Tim Walton would know exactly who to play.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
If Brian Hartline needed to go down in his room and grab Bryson Rodgers, I think he would have a pretty good handle on who should be next and what he might do.
Mm-hmm.
There's been no handle on that in the O-line room. None. But they got a Minnesota tackle who they failed to recruit out of high school. You guys already talked about that on another show. Is that the plan now? Let other Big Ten teams come into Ohio, find guys that you refuse to offer, develop them, and then steal them with NIL money? Great job, guys.
Yeah, that is the plan. Not offer an offensive lineman that most reasonable minds thought you should offer and try to develop yourself, and then just let Minnesota do the legwork and then take him before he's going to start for the Gophers.
He probably would have crawled over glass to get an Ohio State offer, right?
Yeah. And camped well enough. Whatever. I thought he camped well enough to earn one. I wasn't the only one who thought that. Unless
this is actually a better plan. It's like, you know what? I don't know. I might let the Minnesota guys develop him. I'm not sure what's going to happen if he comes here. Because again, how's the development been here? Is that what this happened?
That's where we are. Let him go, because we don't know. Like, maybe he'll be good after 2 years with us. Maybe he won't be. But if he goes to Minnesota, we have a pretty good shot at getting a good player. Like, come on.
Great.
That's where we are. Then blow the thing up.
Great plan. What are we doing? No, I forgot. What was the main thing we were talking about? Oh, the most consequential game Ohio State has played in a decade. Sidetracked by what is happening with the offensive line. I think it is fair to hold this offense to the standard with the skill players they have and enough of the experience they have on the offensive line and a veteran quarterback and a head coach and a play caller who we know each other very well and have had time to prepare for this, that you've got to be able to patch your holes or play around your holes and figure this out. I think there is zero excuse for the Tennessee defense like blowing up the Ohio State offense in this game.
I don't think there's an excuse either. I certainly have no interest in giving Ohio State one before the fact. Good teams should be able to overcome this or find a way around it. There are other teams in the playoff who have either done that in the course of the season or are still currently doing it, and they're finding a way. So Ohio State should find one too.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things I didn't mention the stats. I can't remember where I mentioned stuff. 4 of the 12 lowest graded secondary players by PFF in the playoff or in Tennessee's secondary, including Andre Turrentine, who was an Ohio State guy who transferred to Tennessee as a starting safety for them now. I feel like Ohio State should be able to take advantage of that. And again, I don't think you have to necessarily get great protection for that. We're going to wind up saying some of the same things we said on KOTN, but Will Howard has thrown either the fewest or second fewest deep balls of any player, of any starting quarterback in the playoff. Like Cade Klubnik's thrown more than 70. And I think Will Howard has thrown 33 passes of 20 yards or more down the field this year. But when he does, it's usually to Jeremiah Smith. So I think it's like two opposite things are true at the same time. One is they probably need to use Jeremiah. Like, I wish they would have thrown deep more to Jeremiah Smith this year. I think the fact that they have only thrown the ball that far down the field 2.5 times a game is crazy. I don't know why they don't try that more when you have a chance to have pass interference or give your guy a shot at a 50-50 ball. But also, you believe, and I think you have good stats about that, they use Jeremiah Smith that way too much, and they need to do a better job of getting him the ball on shorter throws and get the ball in his hands. Yeah,
I think his average depth of target is too high. It's 13. Compared to Emeka Egbuka, it's half that, 7.8. Carnell Tates is 10.9. It's a lot of intermediate stuff. It's not, to your point, it's not a lot of chucking it down the field, but it's a lot of like just past the sticks, and that's fine. Like Will Howard, the one thing he's done consistently well, I think all year, has been a good intermediate kind of passer, and short too. His interceptions tend to come, I think, on shorter throws, a couple of them, but if you take those out, and you shouldn't, but aside from those, he's a pretty good short thrower too. I just think Emeka Egbuka, we know, is good like after the catch, and they do seem to tap into that a decent amount. It's also inherent, I understand that, more to slot play than it is on the outside. But Jeremiah Smith is so good after the catch. Like, yeah, we did practically an entire podcast on the what was that, the little stop route where he caught and then ran through the entire defense. What was that, a 6-yard pass that he took for a 70-yard touchdown? Like, I think they need to do more of that. We saw them throw, a decent amount of wide receiver screens earlier on, like first half of the season, that have seemed to disappear, or they're either getting taken away. I don't know what that is, but there should be other ways to get these receivers the ball quicker. It's actually not. I don't think this is a new issue for Ryan Day's passing attack. I think, especially when they had CJ Stroud and there wasn't much of a quarterback run threat, and for at least for 1 year they weren't running the ball very well either. It didn't seem like they tried to make up for that enough by throwing more quick game. And they I just think you can lean into defenses taking away your receivers a little too easily if you're not getting them the ball quicker. So I would very much like to see Ohio State do that in this game, in particular to Jeremiah Smith, because I just think he is extremely good with the ball in his hands after the catch.
And we were having the Marv versus JJ conversation in the first half of the year, and then he had the ankle injury against Northwestern, and it just hasn't been quite as impactful. Right. I feel like you haven't felt him as much in games. And I think I've said multiple times, like, you got to let Jeremiah Smith go win you this game. You've got to let Jeremiah Smith go win you this game. You've talked about Dante Thornton, the Tennessee receiver, who's 6'5" and fast and is a deep threat and averages 26 yards a catch and all. That's not better than Jeremiah Smith.
No,
so Jeremiah Smith needs to be striking fear into a Tennessee secondary that has one great dude and a lot of questionable dudes after that. And they have to be able to get him schemed into favorable matchups and then get the ball in his hands. And again, we cannot come out of this game saying, oh man, I can't believe Jeremiah Smith only had 6 targets. I don't think we will, but it's unacceptable in any form.
Yeah, no, I agree. So he had 13 against Oregon, which just sort of felt like, okay, here we go. And then, he made the point there was an injury in there, but after that Oregon game here, he had 13 targets. It was 4, 7, 7, 6, 5, 7.
What are we doing?
Yeah, pump those numbers up.
What are we doing? I think one of the most frustrating things about this last couple years of the Ryan Day era is that they recruit to one team and then play like another team. And it drives me crazy. And it goes back to like the CJ Stroud needs to run more conversation. It's like, what are we talking about? Why can't this be about accentuating what your incredibly skilled players do best and find out who are your best players and get them the ball? And that's the conversation that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. Did they figure it out? Is this also like, hey, this is the first day of the rest of your life that we look back and say, but now I also feel like we've been saying that for 4 years with the Michigan game. This is when they're going to figure it out. This is when they're going to figure it out. And here we are after 4 Michigan losses saying, well, now maybe they'll figure it out. They're certainly talking like that, but they need to play like that. And if this is another toughness conversation where we're going to pound the ball behind Tegra Shabola, I'm getting mad again. I'm sorry. Why do you recruit one team and then play another way? It drives me nuts.
I don't know. Yeah, I think that is part of the Michigan mental block for sure. But it's also like it has been true prior to that. Same thing with Emeka Egbuka. 3 games in a row against Michigan State, Iowa, and Oregon. 11, 11, 10 for targets. Since then, 5, 3, 3, 4, 7, 8. How is that possible? Defenses like do stuff to take your guys away. Like I understand, like, that is the nature of football. Scheme them back. Move them around, right? Get those guys the ball. They are your best players. Get them the ball.
Okay. I don't think I think it is reasonable to expect Ohio State's corners to be able to cover these guys. Because I was going through like the best receivers in the playoff. I'm not sure. I get it. Dante Thornton is 6'5", but he transferred from Oregon because he couldn't get on the field there. He's not a 5-star recruit who popped immediately. And he only has 25 catches. I don't think he's one of the best 15 receivers in the playoff. I don't think Tennessee has one of the best 15 receivers in the playoff. So this is not when Jalen Hyatt 2 years ago won the Biletnikoff Award over Marv, and everybody was mad about that, right? This is not when they had a bunch of NFL guys and Cedric Tillman was hurt and he came back late in the year. And this is not that. Brew McCoy has been around forever. He's fine. Squirrel White's a slot guy. He's little. This is not a receiver room. This is not Oregon's receiver room. There's no Tez Johnson, and I think Evan Stewart and Dante Thornton are very comparable. But if Ohio State didn't learn some lessons, and then it clearly did, the play that drove all of us nuts in the Oregon game, where they dropped 4 defensive linemen into the middle of nowhere and left Denzel Burke one-on-one against Evan Stewart for a deep ball, they better learn some stuff from that. So don't leave Denzel Burke one-on-one with a 6'5" fast guy for deep shots, okay? And then other than that, they do not have game-breaking guys that should not. If these guys are NFL corners, they should be able to handle this. This looked like the best secondary in the country coming into this year, and we cannot walk away from this game saying like, "Oh man, the Ohio State secondary wasn't good enough against Tennessee." Are you nuts?
So we talked about this on KOTN, the fact that Tennessee forces you to make a choice, and I'll repeat what Caleb Downs said on this episode too. Caleb Downs, who played against played against Tennessee last year while he was at Alabama, said with it's wide splits in the way wide receiver splits. They'll put the receivers outside of the numbers. That's how wide they get. And then the way that Tennessee wants to run the ball, they force your front and your back end to play almost 2 different games. And you have to make a decision on, I guess, which guy you feel more comfortable letting try to beat you, which is Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback for Tennessee, or Dylan Sampson, the running back for Tennessee. Which do you think Ohio State will choose?
I think they should choose to defend the deep ball, play light boxes, and rely on their defensive line and linebackers to tackle Dylan Sampson. But if Dylan Sampson wants to have 28 carries for 143 yards, I'm not sure that wins the game for Tennessee. If they give up 2 deep balls and 14 points on 2 throws, that might win the game for Tennessee. Make them work. Mm-hmm. And again, these tackles for Tennessee are iffy enough. Make them work and then try to force a holding call or get a tackle for loss or something once every 10 plays. I don't think that's too much to ask of Ohio State's front either. So and they have experience with this. This is going back to last year, to the bend but don't break Ohio State defense, right? Where they felt like, so year 1, they were too aggressive. They got burned on big plays. Year 2, they backed off. They didn't give up any big plays, but they probably didn't get after the quarterback and didn't blitz enough. This year felt like the best combination of the two, right? But if you have to go back to do not give up the big plays, but I also think you have to muddy the view for Nico Iamaleava, who thrives off play action, but if you make him sit and read and get to read 2 and 3, I'm not sure about it as a first-year starting quarterback. That has to be your plan. and let Dylan Sampson do his thing. If Cody Simon and Sonny Styles can't tackle Dylan Sampson, then what are we doing here? We're at a point where Ohio State's linebackers can't tackle a good running back. How did we get there? We can't be there. James Laurinaitis is here to fix that. What do you think? He said, shouting.
Yeah, no, I'm a little torn. I'm just look and see. So your plan is what Georgia did. Georgia played with a light box. Georgia
so much respect for the dogs. So much respect.
You love the dogs. You just want to do whatever the dogs do. They play with the light box. They played coverage and they try to keep things in front of them. Tennessee averaged 4.35 yards per play in that game, which was its lowest mark of the season. Lost 31-17 and had 146 rushing and 167 passing in that game. So that's a plan that has worked for another pretty good defense, right? For an Ohio State, we think has a pretty good defense. Ohio State does have a pretty good defense. Perhaps
Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann, dog geniuses. You know what that is, Bill? That's dog mentality, right? That's
dog mentality. But doesn't it, like, if you didn't know that, and you just ask yourself, like, who's been the less consistent player? Wouldn't you maybe err on the side of trying to make Nico beat you rather than Dylan Sampson? If you can shut down the run, if you can play with your 4-2-5, but you got Caleb Downs walk down into the box more often than not. You're playing with 7 against the run, 7.5 against the run, trying to limit first and second down rushing, and then you have Nico in the 3rd and long.
So the Vanderbilt game is the last game it's the last game they played. It's the last game I watched. There were just so many plays in that game where it looked like Vanderbilt didn't have a safety on the field. So if you're bringing guys down in the box, if you're bringing one of the safeties down, and then these wide splits are creating passing angles, and Denzel Burke or Davison Igbinosun gives up inside leverage and leans the wrong way on the outside, and all of a sudden you're running an easy post with no help, and you're not getting home, and Nico has all day. I mean, some of the throws he made against Vanderbilt, he had all day to hit guys who were wide open by 4 yards, 35 yards down the field. It looks so easy. So that's what I would be afraid of from an Ohio State perspective. Like, you cannot let that happen. So if that means that Igbinosun and Burke aren't going to let that happen, or Jermaine Matthews is going to play more and not let that happen against these pretty mid receivers, okay, because I don't think Nico's great. He might get great. I don't think he's great right now, but that's what scares me. That's what scares me about, like, how did that just happen? How was that guy that wide open with these angles they create in the passing game? So would you be apprehensive about that if you were Matt Guerrieri and Tim Walton and Jim Knowles trying to figure this out?
My lean would be at least to open with trying to stop the run, put more resources towards stopping the run. Also, because that's what Caleb Downs does best. Like, you want to put your guys in a position, like, if you want Caleb Downs roam in the middle of the field because you're scared of in-breaking routes turning into something more, I get that, but he's Ohio State's best run defender. So you need to use him that way. So I would start with that and then see where that gets you. And if you have to adjust, then you have to adjust. But I think that I would rather see, or hopefully force Nico to have to convert some 3rd and longs rather than play with a light box and let Tennessee even run for 4 yards at a time. Like, you do that enough, you're going to find yourself in the red zone, right? So you can't do both. I think, it is a hard decision to make for Jim Knowles. Although he sounded pretty not that he would have said, I don't know what we're going to do in this game, but I think just talking from experience of seeing offenses like this and believing that he has a system that is built to combat the pace and space of Tennessee, he seemed comfortable and confident when talking about this game. So maybe Ohio State fans should be too when thinking about how the defense handles it. I just the running game worries me more, so I would focus on that more.
Does it maybe feel like Jim Knowles was meant to defend this? Like, this is why he's here even more than he's here to defend Michigan? Like, he feels like, I'm just repeating what you said, that he feels like he's
I don't know. I don't know if that was Ryan. I think Ryan Day's thought process was let's get a real coordinator and have him be systematic with his defense and get something entrenched that you can build on year after year. That was priority number one. But it just so happens that now I think there is some familiarity with the structure of this offense that Jim Knowles, I think, saw a decent amount of when he was in the Big 12. They don't see it a lot in the Big 10. That's one thing that gives me pause with this game as I'm trying to figure out what kind of impact Ohio State's defense might have on it, is that there could be an adjustment to this, because it is a style, even like across the sport, at least across power conferences, that feels a bit unique now. It used to be very in vogue, but I believe less so in 2024, and especially in the Big Ten. So if there's a case where like Ohio State is on the field for the first 4 drives trying to figure that out, and in the course of those 4 drives, Tennessee gets 10 or 13 points because Ohio State's trying to get its feet under it, but that could be a major impact in the game, because I don't. Ohio State could go out and put up 35 points on Tennessee, but Ohio State might also have to win the game like 23-13 or something like that. And if there's a feeling out period for Ohio State's defense, then I don't know if you feel tremendous about a lower scoring game.
Can I ask you a football question?
Mm-hmm.
Wide split. So everybody in football, right? They want to spread you out and run, and then they want to bring you in tight and throw, right? Ryan Day wants to do that too.
Yeah.
Part of it.
Yeah.
So if this wide split thing with the receivers so outside the numbers, and then it spreads you out and it forces you to play 2 different games in the back end and up front, and it creates running lanes for your talented running back, why doesn't everybody do this? What is the vulnerability of this offense that feels like, as we talk about it, it's like, well, you can't stop this offense. Why doesn't everybody play this way if it's so effective?
You need a strong-armed quarterback who can get the ball outside the numbers. You need an offensive line that can handle its business. Probably need a bit of a run threat at quarterback too to like really maximize it. So they're like, I think it starts with quarterback arm strength.
Okay,
if you're gonna put your guys that far out wide,
and Nico does have that.
He has a cannon for an arm. Yeah.
As a reminder, though, the 6 real defenses they've played, they've averaged 22 points per game. The 6 bad defenses they've played, they've averaged 53 points per game. They've given up 20 sacks against the real defenses in 6 games. They've given up 4 sacks against the bad defenses in 6 games. So plenty of people have found ways to limit this offense.
Yeah.
And
I
don't want to sit here and underestimate them, but I also don't want to overestimate them.
No, neither do I. So like if you want to check me on that, like I'll take it. And it's less it's less about the talent. It's more about the style. And just whatever adjustment might need to take place with that. But maybe there isn't one, because again, Jim Knowles basically said, like, I got it. So like, okay, if you think you got a good handle on it, then that's great. Then Ohio State is well positioned, I think, to go win the game, even if it does have some issues on offense and can only muster something like 28 points in this game.
And we did our draft last week on Kings of Columbus, the 22 best Buckeyes right now. Like this is what Denzel Burke and Davis Igbignosin and Jordan Hancock are here for. And they weren't as high in our draft as they were at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And so again, they want their team to win, obviously, but they also have futures in front of them. If they can't handle this, they're falling down draft boards. Like this is your chance to shine.
Yeah.
This is your opportunity to show people what you are all about, because you might be set up. But then, but this is one of these things again. Now we're reverting back. I'm going to get mad again. I'm just start getting mad again. So Tennessee's receivers are not as good as Ohio State's receivers.
No.
And Dylan Sampson is very good, but I think the combination of Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson is as good as Dylan Sampson. And so if we are at a point where Tennessee is maximizing all their skill guys who aren't as good as Ohio State skill guys, and then we're sitting here saying, like, why does Ohio State maximize their skill guys? Then we're back to the discussion that we had last year, although your point about this is right. Tennessee runs it 60% of the time. So they line up like this to run it.
Mm-hmm.
But now I want Ohio State to go back to Washington's passing offense. Like, what are we doing? Let's just like utilize your talent. Or do something. Maybe they need to do something different then. If you can't figure out a way, Ohio State has better skill players. Dylan Sampson was the offensive player of the year in the SEC. Ohio State has better skill players than Tennessee. If Tennessee's skill players win this game, I'm going to rip your beard off.
Please don't do that. But I would understand the desire to, the feeling to. Yeah, that's like worst case scenario for this game.
Yeah.
Which I do believe that Ohio State will lean into that, and that'll probably will win them the game. At least I think it should win them the game if that's what they do. Like the struggle for me as I try to figure out like which way, maybe more like what kind of game to pick more than I think who was going to win. Is like I really feel like I need to see Ohio State play.
I agree.
Like, I gotta make my game pick like at the end of the first quarter to see how Ohio State approaches this.
No, I think the exact same thing, because you and I on KOTN on our Thursday show we're not going to make picks on this show. We're not ready to make picks yet, as we record this on Wednesday afternoon. But on the live show Thursday at noon on YouTube, we're going to do a final big game breakdown of Penn State SMU, because on KOTN we've done the other 3 games now. We did Indiana Notre Dame, we did a version of Clemson Texas, and we did Ohio State Tennessee. We're going to do Penn State SMU, and we're going to make our picks for all 4 games. We have not made picks, and we're going to reveal our full brackets. And that's how I feel about the bracket, because I think by the middle of the second quarter, I can make a decision between picking Ohio State to lose to Tennessee and picking Ohio State to win the national championship. I have no idea how to make that decision right now.
No, I'm in the exact same boat. Yeah. I mean, we will. I'm not gonna sit on the fence until kickoff. I will make a pick, and you will too. But I think this is the most difficulty I've had with trying to figure out what I think. And listen, what I think will happen doesn't really matter, but we try to make thoughtful predictions even if they're wrong.
Yeah,
and this is the most difficult time I think I've had trying to figure that out.
We just want to help people. We want to guide them a little bit. That's what we're here for. I will say, so just if people did not see our KOTN rankings, Bill, on Monday, we ranked all 12 teams in 12 different categories, 6 objective and 6 subjective. 3 of the subjective categories that we ranked were defensive dudes, which is your top end defensive talent, defensive holes, which is the fewest weaknesses. So that way we cover both sides of the defensive spectrum, and skill players. Okay. We had Tennessee 8th out of 12 in all 3 of those categories. And when the Ohio State skill players won. So for all of this, we're saying we know James Pierce Jr. off the edge is going to be a top 5 or top 10 NFL draft pick. We know that. We know, what is it? Jaron McCoy? Am I saying it right?
McCoy. Yeah.
Jermon McCoy, their corner, you said is maybe the best cornerback in the playoff, right?
Yeah. I'm trying. I
think you said so. Yeah. But even having Pierce and McCoy, who are 2 elite top end guys, you thought there were 7 other teams that had more dudes. And even with as good as this defense,
by my extremely scientific calculations on the dude meter, I think I had Tennessee with like 1 other guy.
Okay,
I would put in that category. I think it was their other defensive end, Joshua Josephs. Yeah.
Okay. So people know that. And again, for their holes, I thought they have some real issues in the secondary beyond McCoy. So that's why I had them 8th out of 12 in the holes ranking. And then for the skill guys, again, we're talking Ohio State. We're talking Oregon. You maybe thought I had Penn State too high with Ty Warren and the running backs. But again, Dylan Sampson is great. But I don't know who they're... And Thornton's very good. But 3 games with more than 100 yards.
Dangerous. He's dangerous.
He's dangerous. Yeah. But he's not... He has 25 catches. He averages 2 catches a game. And he's had 300-yard games and 6 other games with less than 45 yards receiving. So, okay, how about Ohio State has with their NFL corners, holds him to one of the games where he has fewer than 45 yards receiving. That seems reasonable.
Right. Yeah.
So they're good, but this is a second-tier SEC team. And I brought this up with Stephen Godfrey on Wednesday's KOTN. To me, still the top tier of the SEC is Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. We'll see what Alabama without Saban is. We've been talking about that all year, but for right now, we get it. Tennessee's not this. Tennessee is Penn State. So what's the top of the Big Ten right now? Well, Michigan's the defending national champ. Oregon's the 1 seed, and Ohio State's been the best team in the Big Ten for a decade. So they're the top 3. And then Penn State would be next. So this is Penn State. And when Ohio State plays Penn State, Ohio State fans are like, we better win by 40. Ohio State fans have no respect for Penn State. I think Penn State this year is better than Tennessee. I think they might be significantly better than Tennessee. And I think Drew Aller, maybe just because he's a year older, I think is significantly more prepared to really make a playoff impact than Nico Iamaleava. Unless it's the beginning of him being a superstar, college football superstar. It's like, remember when he won 2 Heismans, but it all began when he threw for 560 yards against Ohio State? I guess that's on the table. I don't know. So
I mean, he has a tremendously high ceiling, I think. But there's also, I've seen some people like doing some stat comparisons, and like Tennessee on the road versus Tennessee at home has been a very different team this year too. And I think Nico's like the shining example of that. So
I think Nico's only made 4 road starts in his career.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to rattle this guy. Okay. We're not mad. We're just...
One of them was Vanderbilt too, which is basically a home game.
Yeah. So it's just, you can't start the season the way Ohio State started it and end it by losing your last 2 games to Michigan and at home to a second-tier SEC team in the playoff. You can't do it.
You cannot.
So you cannot do it. Okay. Can we have the people on the beat who think that you can do that? Do we have them on the show? That's fine. Can we have them on? Invite them on. It's fine. It's fine. They tried. Okay. We will. What's our plan, Landis? Okay. So people don't care about where we're traveling, but just so they know, you're going to be at Notre Dame Friday night.
I will be at Notre Dame, Indiana Friday night, and then I will be in the shoe on Saturday night.
I will be at Penn State SMU on Saturday afternoon, and I find it very hard to fathom how I could get to Ohio State for that night game with the travel time in between. So I have a pass, but I don't think I will be there. But our plan is that we will do a
try.
It's going to depend on...
Just see how far you get.
I'm going to know when I leave.
Yeah.
So if I'm leaving at 5 and it's a 5-hour drive, I'm not going to make it.
It's more like a 6-hour drive. Yeah.
So
leave at halftime.
Yeah. I mean, So, I mean, like you said, it's like, well, the games are going to be long. They're going to have a million commercial breaks for this stuff. It's going to take people forever to come into the post-game news conference. Then there's going to be traffic. I can't wrap my head around it. And if I'm going to get there in the middle of the third quarter, then I may as well just come back to my house and get ready for the post-game show. And there's also a part of me that like, I don't necessarily want to be driving during the whole game. So if I'm not going to make it, I think I'm just going to stop in a hotel and watch the game on TV and then be ready to do the post-game show, because our plan is on KOTN, live post-game show Friday night after Notre Dame, Indiana, live post-game show Saturday night after Ohio State, Tennessee, Sunday sound off, Kings of Columbus on this feed Sunday afternoon. Fair?
Yes, that is the plan. Yeah.
Okay. You're the chief of content. So I'm sorry. Am I too angry? Why do you think I'm angry?
I don't know. Like when I have that tone when it comes to talking about Ohio State football, I am feeling that way on behalf of the fan base, and that's what I sense. And I know, like, not everyone I think would say that anger is their current disposition, but I think a lot of the fan base would. So that like it's like anger mixed with excitement, right? Like it's anger based off of just like the unfathomable game plan against Michigan, combined with like a smidge of worry that they might try to do the same thing against Tennessee. But I think mostly excitement that they won't, but also some like incredulity at the possibility that they would. Like there's a lot there.
God, our therapists are going to have a lot to work with there. What percent incredulity do you think it is? 8% incredulity? Yeah. On behalf of the fan base, you can't start where this season started and end where this season could potentially end. Yeah. But we're also prepared for like, there they are. There they are. There they are. They're back.
Sure. Yeah.
If they ever left, if they just had a 1-game blip because they can't get those guys up north out of their head. They can't handle Michigan. Otherwise, they're good. But now the other part of it is, the way the Michigan game unfurled, did it make you question anything, for instance, about the Penn State game, which was a great win on the road against what I think is a very good team? but it also kind of came down to a lucky interception in the end zone and horrible Penn State play calling that led to 2 drives inside the 5, ending with no points for Penn State? Like, did you re-examine that game and be like, oh man, Ohio State actually was kind of lucky to get away with that one, or just a good win?
No, I don't think
Okay.
I went back and I don't think I went back and re-examined much from what had happened previously this season. I definitely went back and re-examined my thoughts on some previous Michigan games, because of what happened. But like the only the two football things that came out of that game for me were, one, like this, the game plan was bad. Don't do that again. And I think they probably won't. But it's all, and then the more glaring, which is like, is this offensive line good enough to like get them to where they want to go? Which is I think the far more interesting and pertinent conversation.
Okay. All right. We would welcome you guys to join us on Kings of the North on Thursday, when we'll make our picks for this game and every other game. We'll tell you what we think is going to happen and who's going to win the national championship. If you guys don't regularly watch KOTN and you still want to be part of it, we're having a bracket competition and bowl pool with a website called poolpartygaming.com. And if you go there, you'll find our KOTN game. You would have missed the first bowl game on Tuesday night, and you would have missed the first bowl game and the next bowl game. There's one is there one on Wednesday night? There might be not one. What do we do with Northern Bowls?
There's
two. Okay.
I don't know if they're Northern Bowls, but there are. I can tell you as we're talking.
But even if you miss the bowls, you can still do the bracket. It's like an NCAA basketball bracket. You pick the whole bracket before it starts. And who cares if you missed a couple bowl games? You only have to pick each bowl before kickoff. So it's still fun. Still come join us. Tell a friend. But you can really get it on the bracket stuff. And I got to get prizes figured out. So
you will not miss anything, by the way. I think the next bowl we're picking is Friday.
Okay, so plenty of time. Yeah. So everybody got screwed up on the West Virginia-Memphis bowl game anyway. You're not really behind. Mm-hmm. We're picking against the spread and the total for all 20 of the bowl games we're picking. And Landis and I each have half a point because we pushed on the spread and we missed on the total. So you're a half a point behind us. You can make up the ground. So come find us at poolpartygaming.com and join us there for a bracket and bowl pool. Thanks, as always, to our producer, Mike Yorstowski, for making us look good and sound good. For now, he is Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. We'll see you on KOTN. We'll see you on Sunday Sound Off. And that was Kings of Columbus.